My wedding day nightmare. My best man had a secret affair with my fiancé for months, shattering trust, friendship. How I lost two of the closest people in my life. I woke up that morning feeling a strange mixture of excitement and nerves. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, casting a warm glow over the room. I had spent countless hours preparing for this day. My heart was racing, not just from the anticipation of marrying the person I loved, but from the weight of all the planning, the endless decisions, and the hope that everything would finally be perfect. I could hear faint sounds of laughter and movement from the hotel staff downstairs, setting up tables and arranging flowers. And I tried to let that calm me. As I got dressed, buttoning up my suit with meticulous care, I couldn't help but notice the small details that made the morning feel surreal. The crisp smell of fresh linen, the faint scent of my cologne lingering in the air, the soft hum of my playlist echoing in the room. Everything seemed normal, almost too normal, and yet a tiny, unplaceable unease gnawed at the back of my mind. I brushed it off, telling myself it was just pre-wedding jitters. After all, this was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. I went through the motions, tying my tie, adjusting my cufflinks, checking the reflection in the mirror. But as I stared at myself, trying to calm the fluttering in my chest, I felt it, a creeping sense that something was off. Little things I hadn't noticed before began to register. A lingering glance my best man had shot me earlier, a slightly too casual text notification buzzing on my phone, a shadow in the corner of my mind whispering doubt. That I shook my head, trying to laugh it off. "It's just nerves," I whispered to myself. But that uneasy feeling wouldn't leave. I told myself to focus on the day ahead, the ceremony, the vows, the smiles, the music. I thought about my fiancé, about the life we were about to start together, and that warmth began to replace some of the tension. I took a deep breath, trying to anchor myself, but somewhere deep down, a tiny, nagging doubt remained. Like a thread tugging at the edge of a carefully woven tapestry. It was subtle at first, almost imperceptible, but it was there. And I had no idea just how violently that thread was about to unravel everything I thought I knew. I was in the middle of rehearsing my vows, pacing nervously in the quiet of my hotel room, when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I reached for it without thinking, expecting maybe a last-minute call from a vendor or one of my siblings checking on me. But the message that lit up the screen made my stomach twist in a way I hadn't felt before. It was from my best man, and the preview alone sent a chill down my spine. I hesitated, thumb hovering over the screen. Normally, I didn't pry into messages between my friends and my fiancé. I trusted them implicitly. But something in that tiny notification, that unread snippet, felt off. Something in the tone, in the words visible, set off alarms in my mind. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my racing heart. The rational part of me said it was probably nothing, maybe a joke, a misunderstanding, just wedding day, nerves playing tricks on me. But the creeping sense of unease refused to fade. Curiosity got the better of me. I unlocked the phone and began reading the messages. At first, they seemed innocent enough, small talk about the wedding, last-minute details, playful banter. But then, buried between emojis and casual phrases, there were hints of something far more intimate. Lines that didn't make sense, words that carried a double meaning, a familiarity I couldn't explain. My chest tightened, a cold sweat forming on my brow. I wanted to stop reading, to tell myself I was imagining things, but every instinct screamed at me to know the truth. That I tried to calm my thoughts, pacing back and forth. "It's nothing," I muttered repeatedly, clutching the edge of the dresser. But my mind kept circling back to a fleeting comment my best man had made during breakfast yesterday, a slip of the tongue I hadn't paid attention to at the time. Now it seemed loaded, like a puzzle piece falling into place. And as I scrolled further, the pieces were starting to line up in a way that made my stomach churn and my hands tremble. By the time I put the phone down, I felt a mix of dread and disbelief. A quiet fear settled over me like a heavy fog. I couldn't shake the feeling that the perfect day I had envisioned was beginning to fracture, and that the foundation I had trusted for so long might not be as solid as I thought. Every laugh I heard from the hallways outside, every light step on the carpet, suddenly seemed foreign, almost mocking. I knew, deep down, that something had to be wrong, and I feared I was on the brink of discovering a truth I might never be able to unsee. I was pacing nervously in the corridor outside the hotel suite, trying to calm the storm brewing in my chest. My suit jacket felt suffocating, my hands trembled, and my mind raced in circles, replaying the messages I had just read. That uneasy feeling from the morning had now erupted into something tangible, a gnawing dread I couldn't ignore. And then, just as I was about to convince myself to let it go, I heard it. My name, whispered softly but unmistakably. Through the slightly ajar door of the room where my best man and my fiancé were supposed to be finalizing details, that I froze, every muscle in my body tensing. At first, I thought I must be imagining it, that my mind was spiraling out of control. But then the words became clear, sharp, cutting straight through me. The best man, laughing nervously, confessed to having been involved with my fiancé for months. My brain refused to comprehend it at first, replaying the words over and over, each repetition twisting the knife deeper. Months. Months of betrayal. Right under my nose. Right on what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. I felt my legs weaken, and I grabbed the nearest wall to steady myself. My heart was pounding so loudly I was sure they could hear it, my chest a constant, unbearable drumbeat of disbelief and rage. I had always trusted both of them. Trusted my best man as a brother, my fiancé as my partner, the person I had imagined, growing old with. And now that trust lay in shards at my feet, that I wanted to scream, to charge in and confront them. But something stopped me, a small, calculated voice in my head warning me to stay silent, to observe first. I needed proof, I needed clarity, and I needed to understand the full scope of this betrayal before anyone could lie their way out of it. So I stayed there, pressed against the wall, straining to hear every word. The confession continued, laced with laughter, excuses, and twisted justifications. Each phrase cut deeper, each detail a corrosive drip of reality. By the time they parted ways, and I finally let myself step back into the hall, I felt hollowed out. The world seemed unreal, colors dimmer, sounds muted, as if everything had been drained of its meaning. The wedding, the friends, the family, none of it mattered in that moment. Only the raw, searing truth remained. My best man and my fiancé had betrayed me, and nothing would ever feel the same again. That I spent the next hour wandering the hotel corridors, my mind spinning like a storm. Every face I passed seemed to hold a hidden meaning. Every smile felt like a mask concealing some dark truth. The realization of what I had overheard settled over me like a weight I couldn't shake. I had trusted my fiancé, my best man, my friends. And now that foundation of trust felt like sand slipping through my fingers. I couldn't stop replaying the confession in my head, imagining every whispered word, every fleeting glance they had shared in my presence without me noticing. The more I thought, the angrier I became, not just at them, but at myself for missing the signs, for ignoring those tiny, nagging doubts I had pushed aside in the past. Every conversation I had remembered suddenly seemed loaded with hidden meanings, every touch or casual joke a betrayal in disguise. When I returned to the suite, I found my fiancée laughing with the bridesmaids, completely unaware of the storm raging inside me. Her smile, once so comforting, now felt like a dagger twisting in my chest. I forced myself to speak normally, to smile, to act as if nothing was wrong. But inside, my mind was a battlefield. I started questioning everyone around me. Friends who had been encouraging the wedding, family members who had praised our relationship, even the hotel staff who had been so friendly. Could anyone be trusted? Was everyone complicit in some way? I began noticing the little things I had always overlooked. The way my best man would brush past my fiancé's messages, the lingering glances she shared with him, subtle comments that now felt like coded signals. It was as if a veil had been lifted, revealing an entirely new reality I hadn't known existed. My own home, my social circle, my carefully curated world. All of it seemed foreign, unstable, as if one wrong move could send it crumbling. By the time I sat down alone, phone in hand, I realized I was caught in a spiral of mistrust, a pit that seemed to grow with every thought. The morning's excitement was gone, replaced by a gnawing fear and an overwhelming sense of isolation. I knew that I couldn't confront anyone yet. I needed evidence, a plan, a way to understand the full extent of the deception before making any move. But even as I forced myself to breathe, a tiny ember of hope lingered, whispering that I could navigate this chaos and emerge with clarity. I just had to survive the storm, that I could no longer sit in silence, letting the pieces of betrayal swirl endlessly in my mind. I needed answers, painful, raw, undeniable answers. I found my best man alone in the hotel lounge, pretending to check his phone, oblivious to the storm that was about to hit him. My heart pounded as I approached, every step heavy with anger and disbelief. "Can we talk?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. He looked up, startled, a flicker of unease crossing his face, but he quickly masked it with a forced smile. I could tell he knew I had heard something, and that knowledge seemed to make him shrink slightly under my gaze. We sat down, and for a moment, the silence was deafening. I searched his eyes for any trace of honesty, any shred of guilt that would explain how someone I trusted so completely could do this to me. "I know," I said finally, my voice low, cutting through the quiet. "I know about you and her." His expression changed instantly, a mixture of shock and panic. He tried to deflect, to joke, to claim it was nothing, but I wasn't there for excuses. I could feel my hands trembling, my chest tight, my mind teetering on the edge of rage. "Don't lie to me," I snapped. "I heard everything, every word, every confession, and I need the truth now." He swallowed hard, hesitated, then admitted to the relationship in fragments, stumbling over explanations that only made it worse. The intimacy, the secrecy, the months of hidden texts and meetings, they all came spilling out. I felt a wave of nausea, anger, and disbelief, each sentence driving the reality further into me like a blade. I wanted to scream, to demand retribution, but I forced myself to stay composed, to listen, to understand the full extent of the betrayal. By the time he finished, my vision was blurred with a mix of tears and rage. The best man I had considered a brother, the friend I had trusted with my deepest fears, had become a symbol of deception. And yet, amidst the storm of anger, a cold, calculating clarity emerged. I knew I had to plan my next moves carefully. This was no longer just about feelings. It was about protecting myself, uncovering the truth completely, and preparing for the confrontation that would inevitably change everything. After confronting the best man, I realized that anger alone wasn't enough. I needed proof. Concrete evidence, undeniable facts that would expose the betrayal and prevent any denials or half-truths. I returned to my hotel room, feeling a strange mix of determination and exhaustion. My hands shook as I pulled out my laptop, my mind racing through every possible source of information. Text messages, emails, social media, photos, even casual comments in group chats. All of it could be a piece of the puzzle that I started with my fiancé's phone, cautiously scrolling through past messages, paying attention to timestamps, emojis, and the subtle changes in tone that betrayed intimacy. Every little exchange I found made my stomach turn, confirming what I had already feared. I realized how meticulously they had hidden their interactions, how carefully they had constructed a facade of normalcy around our wedding. The deceit was almost artistic in its precision, and the realization made my blood boil. But I didn't stop there. I began to cross-reference information, comparing the messages with social media activity, locations, and timestamps. Each inconsistency, each unexplained absence, each small lie became another brick in the wall of evidence I was building. I documented everything meticulously, knowing that this would be crucial later, not just for my own understanding, but to confront them with irrefutable proof when the time was right. The more I dug, the more I uncovered. Photos I hadn't noticed before, subtle comments from mutual friends, snippets of conversations that revealed clandestine meetings. It was overwhelming, the sheer scope of the deception, but I felt a strange clarity amid the chaos. For the first time since that morning, I felt a sense of control returning. That I also reached out to a private investigator friend discreetly, explaining the situation and asking for advice on legal and ethical ways to gather information. We discussed accessing public records, checking travel logs, and other legal avenues that could shed light on the extent of the betrayal. I wanted a complete picture, not just for my own anger, but to ensure that when the confrontation came, I would be fully prepared, armed with truth that could not be disputed or twisted. By the end of the day, I had accumulated a dossier, a chilling, undeniable testament to months of lies. Every time I reviewed it, I felt a mix of satisfaction and sorrow, anger and heartbreak. The betrayal was real, and the evidence was irrefutable. I knew that the next steps I took would change everything. My wedding, my friends, my fiancé, and even my own sense of trust would never be the same. But at least I was ready. By late afternoon, I knew I couldn't wait any longer. The weight of deception had become unbearable, and every second that passed felt like a betrayal in itself. I took a deep breath, gathering the fragments of composure I had left, and asked my fiancé to step aside with me, away from the bustling hotel staff and the pre-wedding chaos. Her smile was bright, unaware, a cruel contrast to the storm raging. Inside me, "Everything okay?" she asked casually, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. My throat tightened, and I struggled to keep my voice calm, controlled, but there was no disguising the intensity in my eyes. "We need to talk," I said, my words slicing through the air. Now, we walked to a quiet corner of the suite, far from prying eyes, and I turned to her, holding back the rage and sorrow that threatened to spill. "I know," I said flatly, my voice steady but cold. "I know about you and him. I've seen the messages, the texts, the photos. I know. Everything." Her face paled, eyes widening in shock, then narrowing in fear. She tried to speak, to explain, to deny, but I stopped her with a gesture. "Don't. Just don't. I don't want your excuses. I want you to understand what you've done." Each word was deliberate, heavy with betrayal, carrying the weight of months of lies condensed into this single confrontation. She stammered, words spilling out in a nervous jumble, pleading, trying to rationalize her actions, but I could see through it all. The charm, the smiles, the carefully constructed lies, it was all crumbling in front of me. I felt a mix of disgust and heartbreak. Every memory we had shared suddenly tainted, every promise shattered. That I took out my phone and began showing her the evidence I had meticulously collected, the texts, the photos, the inconsistencies, the hidden conversations. Her hands shook as she tried to cover her face, but there was no denying the proof. I could see the realization dawning in her eyes, the fear, the shame. And in that moment, I knew the balance of power had shifted. I was no longer just the betrayed fiancé. I was the one who held the truth, the one who could shape what came next. The confrontation left us both drained, but it also clarified everything. The wedding, the plans, the friends, the celebrations, they were all secondary to one overwhelming truth. Trust had been destroyed, and nothing would ever be the same. After confronting my fiancé, I knew the fallout wouldn't be contained to just the two of us. Our wedding had drawn friends and family from all corners of our lives, and the tangled web of lies we had uncovered couldn't remain hidden forever. I had to face our social circle, not with anger, but with the undeniable truth that would expose the betrayal without turning it into a public spectacle. I started with close friends who had been involved in planning the wedding. Sitting down in hushed corners, I carefully shared what I had discovered, showing them selected pieces of evidence without revealing every intimate detail. Their reactions were a mixture of shock, disbelief, and sympathy. Some gasped audibly. Others whispered under their breath, struggling to reconcile the person they had trusted with the actions they had just learned about. Then came the extended family. My fiancé's parents, aunts, uncles, cousins, they all looked at me with a mix of confusion and concern as I explained, in measured tones, the situation. I could see the wheels turning in their heads, questions forming about what had gone wrong, who had known, and how much had been hidden. The weight of judgment was palpable, and I felt a strange sense of relief knowing that I was no longer alone in carrying the burden of deception. Throughout these conversations, I remained calm, controlled, almost clinical in my delivery. I didn't need to shout or plead. The evidence spoke for itself. Every raised eyebrow, every gasp, every whispered question confirmed that the truth had the power to dismantle the carefully maintained facade my fiancé and best man had constructed. It was surreal, watching people I cared about process shock and betrayal, realizing that their opinions now carried weight in the unfolding drama. By the end of the day, the social circle had shifted. Friends and family began to take sides, some expressing solidarity with me, others retreating in awkward silence, unable to process the revelations. I felt a mix of exhaustion and quiet satisfaction. I had navigated the storm, revealed the truth strategically, and begun to reclaim control of a situation that had threatened to consume me entirely. The wedding, once a celebration of love, had become a crucible for truth, and I was determined to emerge with clarity, dignity, and a plan for the next steps. By the evening, I sat alone in my hotel room, the chaos of the day settling into a tense stillness. I knew confrontation alone wouldn't be enough. I needed a plan. The betrayal had stripped me of trust, but it hadn't stripped me of control. I needed to protect my future, my reputation, and ensure that justice, personal and legal, would be on my side. That I started by mapping out everything I had learned, the timeline of the affair, every secret meeting, the texts, the messages, the photos, and the inconsistencies in their stories. Each piece of information was a puzzle piece, and I began fitting them together to form a clear picture of the deception. The more I reviewed, the more patterns emerged, moments of calculated lies, deliberate misdirection, and manipulation designed to keep me unaware. Next, I researched legal avenues. Divorce law, property rights, potential claims, and strategies to protect assets. Every piece of information became ammunition for the inevitable confrontation. I contacted a lawyer discreetly, explaining the situation and seeking advice on how to proceed without alerting my fiancé prematurely. The lawyer's guidance confirmed what I already suspected. Evidence was my strongest weapon, and patience would be critical. That I also considered the social and emotional battlefield. Friends, family, mutual acquaintances, they could be allies or obstacles. I began planning who needed to be informed, when, and how. Strategic disclosures would prevent misinformation from spreading and ensure that my side of the story remained credible and respected. Amid all this, I felt a strange clarity. The betrayal, while painful, had illuminated weaknesses and strengths I hadn't acknowledged before. I realized that my emotions, anger, hurt, disbelief, needed to be channeled, not suppressed, into calculated action. This was no longer just personal revenge. It was about reclaiming agency over my life and ensuring that deceit and manipulation would not dictate the outcome. By the time night fell, I had a blueprint for action. Gather the remaining evidence, maintain composure publicly, prepare legal strategies, and slowly expose the truth to those who needed to know. I felt a cold determination settle in my chest. This was no longer a story of heartbreak alone. It was a campaign for justice, clarity, and ultimately, my own peace of mind. Over the next few days, I dove deeper into the evidence I had gathered, driven by a mix of anger and the need for clarity. What I initially thought was the full extent of the betrayal began to feel like only the tip of the iceberg. Hidden messages, deleted chats, and small inconsistencies in alibis pointed to layers of deceit I hadn't anticipated. Each revelation made my blood boil, yet also strengthened my resolve to act strategically. That I started noticing patterns in her past behavior, subtle manipulations, carefully constructed lies, and moments where she had taken advantage of my trust. It wasn't just about the affair. It was about the erosion of honesty and loyalty in our relationship over time. The more I uncovered, the more I realized that her deception had been methodical, almost clinical, designed to exploit my goodwill and blind spots. That I also discovered interactions with mutual friends that she had kept secret, small betrayals that had gone unnoticed but added up to a shocking picture of duplicity. Even casual conversations I had overlooked began to make sense in the context of these newly revealed lies. It was surreal how meticulously she had hidden her tracks, and yet, now, all the pieces fit together with disturbing clarity. The more I reviewed, the more I began documenting everything systematically: screenshots, timelines, context notes, cross-references. I wanted an unassailable record, something that would leave no room for denial or manipulation. Every new piece of evidence I uncovered was a blow to her facade and a step closer to reclaiming control over my life. By the end of this painstaking investigation, I realized just how deeply I had been deceived. The web of lies wasn't just about infidelity. It was about manipulation, control, and the deliberate undermining of our shared life. Yet amidst the anger and betrayal, a cold sense of purpose emerged. I was no longer just the victim. I was the architect of the coming resolution, armed with truth and ready to act with precision. The moment to act had arrived. I could no longer let the deception linger in the shadows, poisoning my life and the lives of those around me. With the evidence meticulously compiled, I began the process of exposing the truth, carefully, strategically, and with full control over how it would unfold. That I first called a few trusted friends individually, sharing enough information to alert them without overwhelming them with details. Their reactions ranged from disbelief to silent shock, and I could sense their loyalty shifting toward me as they absorbed the reality of the betrayal. Their support bolstered my resolve, reminding me that I wasn't facing this alone. Next, I confronted her more formally. I presented the evidence in a methodical, unwavering manner. Texts, emails, photos, timelines, all meticulously organized to leave no room for excuses or lies. Her initial attempts to deny, to charm, to manipulate fell flat against the undeniable facts. Every lie she had spun, every hidden meeting, every deceitful action was laid bare. The confrontation was intense and exhausting. She oscillated between panic, anger, and feigned remorse, but I maintained a calm, almost detached demeanor. The power had shifted. I wasn't pleading for explanations. I was delivering the truth with precision, ensuring that the betrayal could not be dismissed or reframed. That I then extended the exposure to those directly affected, the wedding party, close family members, and mutual friends. I controlled the narrative, presenting only the verified facts, which left no room for gossip to distort the reality. The shockwaves were immediate. Whispers, stunned silence, and a recognition among our social circle that the betrayal was as extensive and calculated as I had uncovered. By the time the day ended, the truth had been fully revealed. The facade of my fiancé's innocence had crumbled, and the network of lies that had once seemed impenetrable was now completely dismantled. I felt a mix of vindication and sorrow. The person I had loved and trusted had orchestrated a deception so vast. It left a permanent mark on my life. Yet within that sorrow, a sense of empowerment emerged. I had reclaimed control, exposed the truth, and set the stage for justice and closure. With the truth fully exposed, I knew that emotional confrontation alone wouldn't be enough. I needed a legal strategy to protect myself from potential fallout, safeguard my assets, and ensure that the betrayal didn't extend into other areas of my life. I scheduled a confidential meeting with my lawyer, outlining the evidence I had collected and asking for guidance on the best course of action. We discussed filing for annulment of the engagement, considering the implications of fraud and misrepresentation. We reviewed property agreements, financial records, and potential claims she could make to ensure I would not be vulnerable to manipulation or false accusations. Every document, every message, and every witness account I had meticulously compiled became a critical tool in building a solid legal foundation. That my lawyer advised me to document every interaction moving forward, maintain strict control over communication, and prepare for the possibility of court hearings. I realized that the law could provide a shield against her attempts to manipulate outcomes or sway mutual friends and family. It was a sobering realization. Even as the emotional battle raged, a parallel strategic war had to be fought in the realm of legal authority. That I also began preparing for potential confrontations with others involved, especially the best man, ensuring that their testimonies, if needed, would align with the facts. Each step required precision, patience, and vigilance. My goal wasn't revenge for the sake of anger. It was to reclaim control, protect my life, and secure a future free from deceit. By the end of the week, I had laid a comprehensive legal plan, evidence organized, witnesses identified, and a clear path forward. The storm of betrayal had transformed into a calculated campaign of justice and self-preservation. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of clarity and power, knowing that I was no longer at the mercy of lies and manipulation. I had the truth, the law, and my resolve on my side, and I intended to see it through to the very end. Once the legal strategy was in motion and the truth exposed to those closest to us, I finally allowed myself to confront the emotional aftermath. The storm of anger, betrayal, and disbelief had begun to ebb, leaving a strange mixture of relief and lingering pain. I spent hours alone, reflecting on what had happened, on the person I thought I knew, and on the life we had been planning together. Sleep was elusive. Each night, memories of shared moments, the wedding planning, quiet conversations, laughter, and dreams of the future clashed violently with the harsh reality of deceit. I found myself oscillating between grief for the loss of what could have been and a simmering satisfaction that truth and justice were now firmly in my hands. That I also grappled with the fear of how others would perceive me. Mutual friends, extended family, colleagues, they had witnessed fragments of the chaos, but only I held the complete picture. The weight of carrying the full truth was heavy, yet it also gave me strength. I realized that enduring the emotional turmoil was a necessary step toward reclaiming my life fully. Therapy and reflection became crucial. I began writing down my thoughts, venting my anger and disappointment, and confronting my vulnerability. It was painful to acknowledge how deeply I had been deceived, yet cathartic to channel these feelings into clarity and resilience. Each journal entry, each contemplative walk, each conversation with trusted allies helped rebuild my sense of self that had been fractured by betrayal. Despite the devastation, a sense of empowerment grew. I was no longer a passive participant in my own life. The experience had stripped away illusions and revealed the importance of vigilance, self-respect, and the unwavering pursuit of truth. And amid the chaos, I felt a quiet, unshakable resolve. No matter the emotional cost, I would emerge stronger, wiser, and fully in control of my future.